four arguments have come up, which are distinct in terms of challenging the reliability of our moral intuitions. So the arguments that we've seen are arguments from disagreement, the argument from pessimistic induction, the argument from framing effects, and the argument from evolutionary debunking. So overall, it seems like these arguments do a pretty good job of challenging the idea that our moral intuitions are trustworthy, at least in the first instance. So our moral intuitions that um, we have without kind of checking them or qualifying them, it seems like some of them might be untrustworthy based on the success of these arguments. So defenders of moral intuitions might want to claim that there are some parts of our moral intuitions that really are just self-evident, but they're going to have a pretty hard time doing that based on the arguments that we've seen so far. It doesn't seem like we can simply trust our intuitions unquestioningly. So in order to kind of resist this conclusion, one thing you could do is try and suggest that all of these previous arguments that we've considered failed. And we've considered some potential counter arguments for some of the arguments that we've seen so far. I'm going to move on with the assumption that these arguments, at least some of them, are convincing to at least some degree. And so, in order to kind of rescue our moral intuitions and try and see what we can preserve of our initial assumption that our moral intuitions are, reliable at least to some degree, I'm going to start by thinking about what kinds of moves we can make to try and rescue the prospect of our moral intuitions. So, one thing we could do is try and take an approach of trying to root out bad intuitions. So, we might want to take this approach if we suspect that some of the arguments that we've had have shown that at least some of our intuitions are going to be unreliable, but maybe not all of them. So we can try and dispense with these unreliable intuitions. So how could we do that? Some ways that we could do that are to try and reduce our confidence in intuitions that aren't widely shared. So if we consider the example before of somebody who had this deeply religious upbringing, if they were then exposed to the idea that lots of different people in the world don't share their intuitions, or at least not as strongly, then it seems like the responsible thing for that person to do would be to reduce their confidence in their intuitions being correct. And so that would leave us potentially with being much more confident in intuitions that are widely shared, and then maybe less confident in intuitions that aren't widely shared. And this seems like that's something that's going to be good if we want to get to our intuitions being trustworthy, because it seems like if lots of people do believe it, at least there's probably a higher chance of it being correct. That's an assumption, but it might be an assumption that we could try and defend through an independent principle. Another option that we could take here is to try and distrust those intuitions that seem to justify one's own advantage over others. So we saw previously when we were thinking about the pessimistic induction that one of the worries about where our intuitions come from might be that at least some of our moral intuitions come about to try and justify our own advantages or our own advantageous position. So we thought about the example of Spartans in their own society and how their justification of slavery might be rooted in their moral intuitions. So this was a social situation that was advantageous to them. We now view it as something that was morally wrong, but their intuitions at least could have come about in order to try and justify and preserve their own advantage. And so it seems like it's worth us at least being skeptical of our intuitions which seek to justify our advantage over others. So, for example, if we have serious moral intuitions that say it's right to discriminate against some people, we ought to be really careful about those and investigate those. And one of the things that we can do here is try and see whether they fit in line with other moral principles that we have. So, if it seems like other people are very confident in egalitarian moral principles, ones which suggest that equality is morally correct, then it seems like we should be especially distrusting of our intuitions if they go against those prevailing moral norms.